The Penn State Nittany Lions have a massive recruiting weekend ahead of them. How many commits will they get? Can they get the top guys? We're going to find that out on this crossover of Locked On Nittany Lions and Locked On the Portal.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into a crossover edition of Locked On Nittany Lions and Locked On the Portal. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for coming in to check out everything that's going on with Penn State football. Truly appreciate it. Going to be talking about the official visit list, which is absolutely loaded for Penn State. James Franklin and his crew have done a good job of getting a lot of guys set up for this weekend, and it's one of the most important weekends in recent Penn State history. Guys from all over the country are going to be in Happy Valley, and to help me figure out who's next for Penn State, why, and everything else that's going on with the Nittany Lions, my guy Zach Sako, Locked On Nittany Lions host. Zach, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, doing very well, because this is easily the most important official visit weekend for Penn State. The amount of high upside, instant impact type of players that are going to be visiting and guys that they are in the thick of other recruiting battles with. So this weekend has the most of my attention out of all the other weekends that have gone on or are going to go on.
Well, that's saying a lot right there, because Penn State's other weekends aren't exactly bad by any stretch of the imagination. No. So let's start off with the most important, at least in my opinion, the most important recruit on the board out of Gonzaga High School in Washington, D.C., Carter Meadows, defensive end. As you know, Zach, pass rushers are always at a premium, and this is a kid that Penn State has targeted for a long time. Penn State gets him this weekend. Then he goes to Ohio State. Then he goes to Michigan. It is the Big Ten East gauntlet, if you will. The three programs that are most known in the Big Ten. Where does Penn State stand? What have you heard? And give your definition of why he is so important to the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, because he is one of the top. I mean, depending on who you ask, you could say that he is the top overall pass rusher, that he is the best pass rusher in the just purely that. If you're looking for somebody to get after the quarterback, Carter Meadows very well might be that in the class of 2026 here. Where Penn State stands, I wouldn't say that they're leading. They're there in the mix, but I've seen, I think it was On3 that initially reported, or at least they said hey, we expect Ohio State to win this one type of thing. Michigan believes that they're in the driver's seat currently. But that's not, Penn State doesn't think that it's behind. If you ask within the program, hey, where do you think you stand for Carter Meadows? They believe that they are in the lead. So you hear one source say one thing, you hear another source say another, but Penn State feels just as confident as Ohio State and Michigan would. This is one of the highest priority recruits on their big board. Penn State has a big board for every recruiting cycle. So Carter Meadows, if they can land him, that would be just one of the signature prospects that are in this official visit weekend. It's not like it's just him as that premier player and then it's everybody else. He is not the only name on this list that I say, Penn State needs to land this commitment if they really want this class to separate itself from, the middle of the pack.
I would agree. Defensive line is probably as big a priority in this class, especially interior, but again, elite pass rushers like that, he might be the best pure pass rusher in the country. It's certainly debatable, but he's in that conversation. You never go wrong with those. Ever, ever, ever. Speaking of defensive linemen, Keyshawn Stansel out of North Carolina, NC State, Miami, and a whole bunch of other programs are after him. Big-bodied kid. It's still growing into his frame. He's 260, 270. That's a guy that I know Penn State really likes, and I would imagine that this year the spot they're the thinnest is D-tackle. They need another couple of really talented defensive tackles. What do you know about his recruitment with Penn State?
It depends what Penn State's ultimate outlook is. They're starting to do the same thing that they do with defensive backs or just skilled position players. Hey, we want to recruit you, whether you settle in at cornerback, safety, or wide receiver even. We just want to get you committed and into the fold, and then we'll figure out things later. That's kind of the similar sense for defensive line right now. They're finding these prospects that are tweeners, if you will. An Alex Haskell, who could be a very strong build, larger, strong side defensive end. Isaac Chukara, same thing. They could be a defensive tackle, bulk up 20, 25 pounds and move them and have them really be an athletic 3-down defensive tackle. So they're not necessarily thin, but if they happen to play defensive end, then okay, yeah, you do need some defensive tackles. So that's what they're doing, is they're just saying, we're going to get athletic, college size ready defensive linemen, whether they end up at defensive end or whether they bulk up and add 20 pounds, as I've mentioned. That's the same thing they're doing here with someone like Stansel. Yes, he is another player that they have prioritized, and I imagine that he's more of a defensive tackle than he would be a strong side defensive end, but don't rule it out because these guys are just athletes. They're just pure athletes. So Stansel is one that, kind of the same thing with Carter Meadows, that objectively speaking, I don't know that Penn State's in the driver's seat for this one, but they still like where they stand, and it would not shock me if they land his commitment. I just wouldn't say that they are the favorite. Doesn't mean that they're not second, doesn't mean that they're not third, but they are strongly in the mix. However, it is more likely that he goes somewhere else as opposed to Penn State, similar to Meadows.
That's a fair assessment, and I think Penn State knows that they're swinging for the fences with really good players. You're probably not going to get all of them, but that's why this weekend is so well balanced. It's kind of looking at it.
Yeah.
They have guys, a lot of, the traditional areas you think in state. They got kids in New Jersey. They got kids from DC, Baltimore area.
Yeah.
It's where you would think, and they sprinkled a few guys like Stansel too. Penn State has always done pretty good in the Carolinas, and this year is really no different. Another guy, speaking of New Jersey, Damari Simeon. He's out of St. Augustine Prep in New Jersey. That's a guy that a lot of people really like a lot, and he is a pure defensive tackle, in my opinion. He's 280-ish, give or take. Penn State, Ohio State, again, it's kind of the same schools. What is the scoop with that big fella?
Same situation that so it's a similar situation in the fact of they're just continuing to load up on, yes, he is more of your prototypical defensive tackle here. So that would be a true take at defensive tackle. Whereas I imagine Chukara does plan to move to defensive tackle, and Haskell is that he's defensive end, defensive tackle, where you don't know at the end of the day. But just going along, they really want to stack up at defensive line because you're going to lose Zane Durant after this season. And then your outlook at defensive tackle is at least in question. They have a lot of players. They have plenty of guys that could stand out, and eventually be some of the most impactful players on this defense, but the more the merrier. So you need to get that reassurance, that insurance that defensive tackle doesn't become a weakness within the Big Ten. Just because the Big Ten added Oregon, USC, Washington, right? UCLA, where they're more pass heavy types of teams, you still have your Illinois, Michigan, Nebraska, even Ohio State went to this, where they went to a little more power football type. So if you are weak in the trenches at defensive tackle, and Penn State already runs a 4-2-5, so that's why there is an emphasis here. So Simeon fits what they want to do. Just somebody who's athletic. He can play 3 downs if you need him to. He would be the pivot for, I wouldn't, they'll take both, right? If Stansel says, hey, I want to commit, Simeon says, hey, I want to commit, they'll take them both. But if you get at least one, then Penn State's feeling pretty good about where they stand with defensive line recruiting in this cycle.
I think that's a fair assessment. And I wouldn't be shocked if they got both, but Stansel as being a guy that's further away, that might be a little more drawn out. When we come back, we're going to talk Penn State commitments, best bets. That is next on this crossover of Locked On Nittany Lions and Locked On the Portal. The NBA playoffs are now down to the NBA Finals, and every night is going to be delivering highlight-worthy plays, big-time performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. Player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and to win big. Pacers and the Thunder. Who do you have and why? Well, a lot of that's probably going to depend on what you think is going to happen with Halliburton, the Pacers guard, who was absolutely dominant in the series against the Knicks. Maybe you think he's going to go off again and have a few 30-point games, or maybe you think OKC is going to be able to hold him down, that's a chance for a same-game parlay or just a player prop. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, $200 in bonus bets are all for you. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Zach, just going to put you on the spot here. And thank you once again for joining me tonight. But best bet, in your opinion, to commit in the immediate future out of the June 6th weekend? I was trying to figure that one out myself. You're more of an insider than me by a mile.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I mean, Penn State's list is really good, but they've been in on a lot of these kids for a long time because they're Jersey, PA, Maryland area. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if any of those kids committed because proximity matters. But where do you think they're going to push, and who do they got the best chance of popping after this weekend?
So best chance, I don't know how immediate, but I'm surprised we actually didn't bring them up in the first segment. That's okay because there's a bunch of other elite names in this group. Luke Wafle is the one that, hey, if we let off with him, it would have made a ton of sense, but it's because Penn State is in the driver's seat for this one. It would shock me if he goes somewhere else. However, Texas, Florida, some defensive end from New Jersey. Brian, you and I have talked about this before, that if a school like Texas has the attention, is trying to get the attention of a defensive end. Now, I know that he's a consensus top 100 prospect, top 50 overall in some places, but Texas making a push for not only Luke Wafle, but Grayson McHugh, offensive tackle in Pennsylvania. He's another priority here. And it's like, well, these are mid-tier 4-stars in some places. And the Texas Longhorns. You want to talk about proximity and how important that is.
That's kind of random, isn't it?
Yeah. In this case, those two prospects are the ones that I have circled because Penn State should, in fact, land them. But it's not these schools, Notre Dame, Texas, they're not going to make it easy. Luke Wafle, his brother Owen Wafle was at Michigan, transferred to Penn State. Penn State, James Franklin, the coaching staff have a very strong relationship with the Wafle family. That's why it would shock me. But you are getting a headline prospect on the other side of the football to go along with Kevin Brown. You have on the offensive side in the trenches, Kevin Brown to anchor the O-line for the future. Luke Wafle would be that at defensive end. So if you miss out on a Carter Meadows, well, at least you have Luke Wafle, but don't necessarily, like I said, Penn State's in the driver's seat, but it's not an easy slam dunk. You got to make sure that you can fend off Florida, Texas, all these other schools. These are national recruitments here on the line for Penn State.
I heard Ohio State with him as well. Like you said, it's a national deal, and he's got a pick of where he wants to go. And he's been a guy we knew about for a while because of his brother. I remember when his brother was coming up there, he was talking about him, and I'm like, okay. If you're getting mentioned when you're like a freshman in high school, that's kind of a sign, especially for a defensive player that plays in the trenches. So that's pretty impressive. Is there anybody else that you think is a really good bet, or at least somebody that Penn State fans should keep their eye out for? Yes. Maybe they can make a move or something like that. Who else would you like to talk about?
So Jackson Ford, I think he was projected by Rivals being absorbed by On3, but I think Penn State's section of Rivals actually put in a projection for them to get Jackson Ford at some point. So that's been a long-standing one. They just like where their recruitment has stood with him. Michigan is heavily involved in that recruitment as well. So Penn State, Deion Barnes are doing very well with the defensive line. That's what the emphasis is here, whether it's true defensive ends, true defensive tackles, or guys that could play either. That is what Penn State's really going after. I have to circle once again because On3 put in a projection for him, Amari Polidor. And Brian, we have to rehash this again. When is it too many defensive backs? When is enough? Because they are leading for Kari Adams. They are strongly in the mix. And I don't know that Penn State can afford to lose him, somebody like Joey O'Brien. So again, Penn State has now, I've lost count. I got to go back to the recruiting class, and I think I got to go through how many defensive backs they actually have committed at this point. 6, maybe 7. And then you're projected to get Polidor, who is a 3-star prospect according to the ratings. But if Penn State really likes him, they don't care about that. They're going to take him anyway. I don't know. When is enough enough? And when do you start to alienate guys that you know are objectively better? Even if Penn State likes somebody, I don't want to dismiss it because I don't want to say that, oh, his commitment doesn't matter. It absolutely does, because you could apply the same thing to a Jazeel Hart, who I think is a really good prospect, but underrated when you look at the recruiting rankings. At what point in time, though, when Dorian Barney's still out there, Kari Adams is still out there, Joey O'Brien, those guys are all playing relatively the same position. At some point, even though Penn State runs with 5 defensive backs, there's going to be too many.
Well, my question for you is, do you think all the guys that are currently committed, are they very solid to Penn State as defensive back commitments?
You know, I got to imagine they are, because, I mean, I've heard that they're not really, they've shut down for the most part. I think everybody in this class has shut down. If they are verbally committed, they've shut down their other official visits. Okay. If you look at them, they're not going on official visits. So everybody else that has given their verbal, and that's what Penn State wants to do. If you are committed to Penn State, you are truly committed. You are not taking other official visits. That's the understanding. That's not a surprise. Penn State does say, James Franklin asks, if you are committed, you are truly committed. You're not taking any official visits. You know that Penn State is where you want to be. Okay, then you are truly committed. So yes, everybody that is committed in the class of 2026 is truly committed, whether they're a defensive back or another position. They are truly committed to this Penn State class.
One more guy from this weekend before I move on. Travis Johnson from Oscar Smith. That's a program that's had players for longer than you've been alive, I can assure you. Visiting Penn State this weekend, Michigan and several other programs involved. Where does Penn State stand? And I honestly don't know. I'm just asking open-endedly, because that's a really talented wide receiver prospect.
Yes, he is. And he's another taller receiver as well. Somebody that you're going to be able to use in the red zone, consensus. I mean, he's starting to teeter in that top 100 category. He's almost there. I'd say consensus top 150 player per the industry rankings. Penn State's had the most visits for him. Now he is a Virginia player. Penn State is in a position where they don't need another. Now, okay. And I say that, let me preface. They need wide receiver help, but when it comes to the class, like overall, you just need to see wide receiver production. So, we'll take as many receivers as you can. Well, Penn State's looking to take about 3 to 4. So they do need to be careful with that final wide receiver spot. But I think Penn State would be more than okay with taking Travis Johnson as that 4th wide receiver commit. But then that means they're done. That means that they're not taking any more wide receivers. So once they take that final wide receiver, if it does happen to be Travis Johnson, that's going to be it for this cycle. And I'd be okay with that. I think if you're Penn State, you should feel pretty good about the 3, potentially 4 prospects that you would have. If you can get Johnson into the fold, you're fending off some pretty decent competition in terms of Michigan, South Carolina. So there's some SEC schools here, West Virginia. So you fend off the regional rivals in terms of recruiting, but also other conferences. So if he has SEC attention, then he's definitely legitimate. If I'm Penn State and I don't want to wait on a 4th wide receiver, I'm taking Travis Johnson.
There's nothing wrong with that. And the bigger receivers like that's the in vogue thing. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more big box with what's going on with Penn State. Are they making a move as a national program? That is next here on this crossover, Locked On Penn State Nittany Lions and Locked On the Portal. All right, Zach, thank you once again for doing this crossover with me tonight. I appreciate it. The big question that I have with Penn State recruiting the way they are, and like you just mentioned, it's something I was going to ask you about. You've already answered it. They've got these kids that are kind of locked down. I think they're recruiting. I was talking to somebody else earlier today. I don't remember which person it was, but Penn State probably does as good a job with organization, kind of zeroing in who they like early. And it even before, like Jawan Sider got a lot of the credit. I gave him some when he was at Penn State, but that whole staff, I think, just does a good job. They find who they want. They just kind of grind. They don't get impatient, and they go after the guys. Even if they commit somewhere else, they keep recruiting them. Do you think this is a top 5 recruiting organization from top to bottom nationally, or do you even really think about it that way? I mean, that's kind of my job, but I think they should be considered in that realm. What do you think?
Depends how you're trying to measure them. And I say that because James Franklin made a good point. He had media availability today, talked to a bunch of other assistant coaches. If you're talking about, if you gave Penn State the same amount of resources that Oregon, Ohio State, if it was a completely level playing field, Penn State would be a top 5 recruiting. If we're talking in terms of the coaches and the staff, I'm talking the recruiting assistants, the guys that are totally focused on brand awareness, building relationships, bridging that gap, everything. Yes, Penn State would be top 5. The difference is, though, that, okay, well, then why don't they have a top 5 class year in and year out? Because college football, this is where I'm taking a page out of what James Franklin has said recently, because it's fresh, it's top of mind. But I agree with him, is that college football is becoming more transactional and not necessarily transformational. So Penn State is still trying to pitch itself as a program where we are going to transform you as a young man, as an individual, as somebody with a career and a rest of their life ahead of them, because football might not be everything to you. And it's not going to be the only thing at the end of the day. So that's what Penn State is trying to position itself as in terms of a program, in terms of more than just college football, where instead of, hey, here's a paycheck, come play, because they very well could do that. But that's just not their value system. That is just not what they're trying to preach and emphasize. So I like that about James Franklin. I like that about Penn State, because it's holding very true to what they've done, over the course of a century with the way that Penn State operates, success with honor. And James Franklin is holding very true to that in an age where there's so much pressure to just cave in and say, let's offer endless amounts of NIL. So Penn State, even though they don't get, this is easy. They don't get top 5 classes. So that means, but in terms of integrity, they do. And in terms of a staff, they do. These are genuine people. I enjoy being around them for these press conferences, for these interviews, because it's not just about money. How much can we build a roster with an unlimited paycheck? No, they try to do it the right way, the success with honor way.
Well, the reason I think it's top 5, my new measurement for recruiting is not who you sign, it's who you keep. Mm-hmm. And when you mentioned a minute ago before the break, Penn State's visits, they got kids coming in that are uncommitted, but the kids that are committed are either going to visit Penn State or nowhere else. Those are the kinds of guys that stick around, Zach. I've been around this business long enough to know when the kids are taking constant visits elsewhere, if things get rough, even if you do sign them, there's a higher percentage chance they're going to bolt. Let me give you a few examples here. Miami signed some really good classes, but like that first really good class they had in 23, over half that class is gone. How much value is there in that? Yeah. And they got some high-end NFL guys, like Maui Noah is going to be a first-round pick, a tackle. Okay, great. But they got too many kids that were mercenaries. I don't think Penn State's taken those flat out. There's no doubt about it. They had to revamp.
They don't want them. They don't. That's the thing. They don't want them. And James Franklin said that our priority is roster retention. We don't 100%. Want constant turnover. We don't want the roster to churn. Guys are hopping in the portal. Then we got to go play free agency. It's the foundation is built through high school football recruiting, relationships, longevity. And at some point, it's paying off progressively because Penn State's had to catch up. You still have to change. You still have to adapt, but it's kept them there. You notice how they don't take these big steps backwards. They take these little steps forward. They didn't get to the college football playoff semifinal on accident. You don't accidentally go uphill. You don't accidentally get better. It's just been more of a slow burn. Okay. So now they have a chance to capitalize on this. They're closer to a national title than ever in James Franklin's tenure. Okay, maybe 2017. Maybe that was the only other, but that was pre-NIL. In the NIL era, transfer portal era, this is the closest that James Franklin and Penn State have been to a national title. And the college football playoff is continuing to expand. More teams, more schools are involved. And Penn State, with the success with Honor Avenue, is better positioned than ever.
I would agree with that. And I also think Penn State, Clemson, Notre Dame.
Clemson too. Yep. Notre Dame. Yep.
Ohio State to a certain degree. They cherry picked at the end last year with some obvious guys out of the portal, but they don't have many kids that leave there that they want. Like, that's the key. Ohio State signs ridiculously good talent, but not many of the elite guys leave. That's the difference. And Penn State is on that verge. They don't quite recruit what Ohio State does in the rankings, but it's similar. And they lose even fewer. I think those might be your top 5 programs. Texas and Georgia are kind of in that mix too, but they've had more busts than some of the other schools I just mentioned. But what I'm talking about gives Penn State a chance, in my opinion, year in and year out, to at least be in the top 10. If your quarterback play is good and you don't have a bunch of injuries, you got a chance. Penn State, I think, is on as equal a footing as it's been in a very, very long time. And I think Penn State fans should be very happy about it. Last question here for me, and I'll get you out of here on this. Do you think that if they have a really good season, let's say that, I'll just throw out a random number. Let's say they go 11-1 the first weekend or the first Wednesday, in December is National Signing Day. Do you think if they go to the Big Ten title game again, if they're ranked in the top 5, do you think they could flip a few more kids? Because a lot of kids are impressionable now. I always bring that up with teams that are like really recruiting at a high level, like Georgia, Texas, whatever. Penn State's in that mix now. Do you think there's anybody they're still going to really go after? Maybe they committed early to another school. Maybe it's a Pennsylvania kid. Maybe it's somebody from Maryland, whatever. Do you think there's anybody like that they might try to scan the list for, like, let's make another run at this kid? It's October. Our class is pretty much done. Who you got?
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly who they would be able to flip if they're, but I do think there is a stigma around Penn State between just national fan enthusiasm, right? Penn State football generates excitement within the diehard fan base. Don't get me wrong. Penn State's got an exceptional fan base, but there is a national perspective that, Penn State's in that B tier, not that A tier. And they still, Boise State wasn't enough. SMU wasn't enough. That's fine. I can understand that. It's Ohio State. It's the elite versions of Michigan. It was the national title. Circumstances aside, they weren't beating those better Michigan teams. Okay. Let's forget it. But Michigan beat them. And then Notre Dame, when you do have that chance to actually turn the corner, I don't think anybody would have slighted Penn State, but it's still, James Franklin can't win the big game, because I can understand, I can reason with, SMU is not the same type of brand. It's not. Boise State's not the same type of brand. It's not. Oregon, you lost to Oregon. You lost to Ohio State traditionally. So they're the teams that are comparable in brand power, that are nationally recognized. Penn State is falling short under James Franklin's direction because, people want to look past some of the New Year's Six bowls. And I get it. I can understand it from the national, casual, or neutral perspective. So that impacts recruiting. That absolutely applies to recruiting, because if college football spectators have this opinion, what do high school recruits say? Well, you're not beating Ohio State. You're not beating Oregon. You're not beating Notre Dame. Schools that are comparable, schools that you're going up against. You don't think Notre Dame's using the Orange Bowl to recruit against Penn State?
100%.
Okay, exactly. And Penn State would probably do the same thing. So that's why you're seeing all these Penn State, Notre Dame recruiting battles, because Notre Dame knows that, hey, we might have a little bit of leverage here. And these are guys that are potentially, if they develop the right way, NFL players at the end of the day. I know that's a lot on high school prospects. So long story short here, Brian, is that Penn State needs that win against Oregon. It would be nice for them to defeat Ohio State as well. You need to at least win one of those games. If you win, I agree. You have to beat one of them. Ohio State would give you more power, more credibility, because it's on the road and everything else, right? Sure. And I've talked about how, Penn State is the better team positioned to win a title this year. I do genuinely believe that. You still have to prove it. Oregon, but if you lose to Oregon at home, whiteout, there you go. So the stigma continues. And then it's going to continue. If you lose that whiteout game, that's going to be the whiteout game. It's not even about the season. The whiteout game is such a massive event for recruiting for Penn State. And you have Oregon, and if you hypothetically lose that game, you're going to stay in that B tier for probably another 2-3 years.
That is a very, very good point, because those kind of games are the ones that recruits want to go see. They watch on TV, and of course, it gets all the media coverage.
They'll be there. That's going to be a crowded game for recruits.
Oh, absolutely. I don't blame them. I'm sure it'd be a lot of fun. Zach, tell everybody where they can find your work.
Same as you, on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Daily source for Penn State football recruiting, basketball, wrestling, you name it, got you covered.
Absolutely. You can find the Portal Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else. Please download and subscribe. Like this podcast. We will see you again soon. This has been the Locked On the Portal and Locked On Nittany Lions crossover.